a tree, where there strung up a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be, if we met at midnight, in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host. You should know who I am by now, Chris James, and this is Kathy. I have a few blood cells floating around in my coffee system. My blood type is OMCT positive, Organic Man Coffee Trike Plus. There are a few folks out there that don't drink coffee. I don't know how they get through the day. It must be hard. I almost always pick up a giant cup of Americano. During World War II, American soldiers would stop in at Italian coffee shops. They discovered those tiny cups of coffee that some folks call espresso were good, but they were too small. So the soldiers would ask the barista, put several small cups of coffee into one big cup and add a little hot water. Thus, the Americano was born. I also don't add anything to my coffee. I like coffee with my coffee. One night, just to be different, I was ordering a cappuccino when Julio asked if I would like to try Cappy Luwak. It wasn't that bad, kind of like a stronger taste, none of the poop flavor that people keep saying it has. I buy bags of Ethiopian beans to take home and grind fresh each morning. 4501 McPherson, as close to heaven as you can get, without the funeral. If it's just too far, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop and order a couple bags. A couple weeks ago, I started working on legendary creatures, only to get caught up in the mermaid sightings. I had no idea there had been so many. By the time I was through, the mermaids had stolen the show. I started working on legendary creatures again. Well, this time dragons took over. I had no idea there were so many sightings of dragons over the years either. Listening to Vic Hermanson talking about the man he watched dowsing got me going on magic or nature. Trailer Trash Terrors is well worth checking out. You don't want Annabelle Lee coming and visiting you in the middle of the night, which reminds me of a thing that happened to a guy at a hotel nearby. He woke up in the middle of the night to find the little girl standing at the foot of his bed. That scared the heck out of him, and then she simply vanished. He mentioned the sighting to the clerk at the desk the next morning, and, well, she was kind of surprised he was not the only one that the little girl had visited. Still trying to find out who she was or what she was. I was scheduled to be on Paranormal Roundtable last Saturday night, but Josh was in San Antonio and he didn't get home until late. We did the show Sunday night instead. The other guest, Rob Yox, was so interesting, all I wanted to do was listen, which I did. Not much I could add to what he had to say. If you watch the show, don't think I'm just sitting there lost as to what was going on. I just didn't have anything to add. I wanted to hear what Rob had to say. Funny thing was, as Rob was talking, my cats all began to get closer to the computer. Rob saw Chance stick his head up in front of the camera, and he said that cats seemed to be attracted to the sound of his voice. Well, this was true. I had 5 of the 6 cats sitting on my desk. The Snowball was on the filing cabinet about 2 feet away. My super crazy cat, a second chance, she looks just like her dad, even stood close enough that I was able to pet her the whole night. The next day, well, she was back to being crazy. Life keeps getting in the way of putting out a podcast. I have things that I must do to keep the home fires burning. My insurance company is being a bit dense. I made the 3-month payment and I have the receipt to prove it. Then I get a bill in the mail telling me that I owe them $35. Considering how much I pay them a month, that's hardly anything. I went over to the insurance agent and I showed them the bill. They told me that I was paid in full up until April. I did not owe a thing. I just got my renewal notice in the mail, followed the next day by a cancellation notice for not paying that $35. I drove over and I tried to get this thing straightened out some more. The folks at the office here in town, well, they're more than helpful. It's the ones at the front office who are not paying attention to what's going on out here. And it appears I'm not the only one. I hope to soon have this straightened out. It's either that or I'll start sending my money to Marvin. Who is Marvin, you might ask? He's that short green guy that says you might save a bunch of money by switching. Yes, the Geico Gecko. His name is Marvin. I know a few of you folks are going to be thinking that I'm just making that up, but it's true. And hey, I am always right at least once in a while. It's so easy a caveman can do it. Too bad the people running my current insurance company aren't cavemen. Just like many of y'all, my life has some twists and turns that make doing what I want harder than seems reasonable. I thought when I retired from work, life was going to be simple. Boy, was I wrong. I am scheduled to speak at a UFO conference in September. Craig asked me if I'd be interested, and I said as long as my truck doesn't break down again, I'll be there. I am compiling all the UFO stories into one volume. Well, I don't have that many UFO stories to make a good-sized book, so if you have any, it sure would help if you'd send them to me. When I ask people for anything that they may have seen or heard over their lifetime, I get dozens of ghost stories here in Laredo. But I don't get that many UFO stories, which is odd. Lots of people tell me about seeing a light in the sky that didn't behave properly. But how many lights in the sky stories can you put into a book and not sound like you're just repeating yourself? If you have some good or even mediocre UFO stories, your own or something that somebody told you, send them to me. Strange things at arcanasa.com, and I'll put you in my current work. You don't even have to use your real name. If you want, just tell me to not use your handle and I'll assign you a new one. I used Carl and Maria way too many times in my last book. As long as the stories are true and not taken from a TV show or a radio program you listen to, send them in. I'll put you in a book. The word myth comes from mythos, that at one time was how history was handed down. The folks that had no written language relied on storytellers to hand down to their history. This was not very reliable, and stories did get a little mixed up. Some chief wanted to be known as a great chief, so he enticed his storyteller to beef it up a bit. Uh, Maybe make him sound more heroic. Maybe he fought a 10-headed dragon that was only a foot long. So he got the storyteller to make it huge. It was 100 feet long and it had heads at both ends. Something like that. Or maybe the storyteller wanted to keep his audience enthralled, so he made a monster fish that was like 6 feet long into a couple of 100 feet. Myths and legends are based usually on actual events. As time marched on, the meanings have been changed so that those people, the ones who don't believe in anything, could claim that none of these things ever happened. Oh, that's just a bunch of myths. Those people. Let's take a look at some mythical creature that just might be real and might still be around today. Dragons are a part of just about every continent's history. The old stories involved flying monsters that weren't all that nasty. European dragons were fire breathing creatures that knights went out to do battle with. They were depicted as being reptile like beings with scales and a long tail, and sometimes they had wings, sometimes not. Depending on who told the story, some dragons hid out in caves, coming out when they were hungry to feed on the local villagers. Some accounts had them guarding huge treasures they had acquired over the ages, as the locals paid them tribute to stop eating everyone. A knight would show up to vanquish the monster, always working alone. You never hear of a group of knights doing it. It was always just one guy on a horse. You'd think the smart thing to do would get a small army to go do the deed. Or was this a means of showing how heroic that one knight could be? Mesopotamian stories of heroes battling monsters are some of the best candidates for early writings about dragons. In the Babylonian version, a serpentine monster called Tiamat emerged from the sea to threaten all of creation with a return to the primordial chaos. The heroic god Marduk slays Tiamat and he rescues the entire cosmos. Now that's a hero. At least his story is. Variations on the story of Tiamat show up in the Mediterranean and European traditions. There are stories of a dragon or a similar monster doing bad things to the locals. A heroic savior shows up to save the day, along with all the locals, by killing the dragon or driving it away. The Bible contains a story that may involve a dragon. That was called the Leviathan. Leviathan is sometimes an embodiment of chaos, threatening to eat the damned when their lives are over. In the end, it is annihilated. Christian theologians identify Leviathan with the demon of the deadly sin, envy, among other references. The Psalms and the book of Job tell how God vanquished the Leviathan, which is something like a cross between a whale and a snake. Jewish writings describe the Leviathan as a dragon who lived over the sources of the deep, and who, along with the male land monster Behemoth, will be served up to the righteous at the end of time. How do you like your dragon cooked? Barbecued? Greek mythology includes several battles with serpent monsters as well. Zeus secures his rule over the heavens and the earth by using his thunderbolts to kill Typhon, the fire breathing dragon creature with snakes for legs. The Greek word drakon gives us the English word dragon. The word drakon comes from the verb meaning to watch. And the connection between the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece comes out. This precious, heavy piece of sheepskin was under the constant guard of a sleepless dragon. Jason's wife, Medea, is a skilled folk pharmacologist. She whips up a batch of sleeping potion, which Jason gets the dragon to drink. Once out cold, Jason steals the golden fleece. Now, the odd thing is, this kind of story comes up on other occasions. European Middle Ages had accounts of dragons being associated with the lives of saints. French bishop and poet Venantius Fortunatus wrote about a dragon in Paris that had dug up the body of a noblewoman. She wasn't all that noble because she was accused of being an unrepentant sinner. The dragon consumed her remains. In front of the gathered citizens of the city, the bishop confronts the dragon, hitting it 3 times on the head. The bishop places a chain around its neck, and then he leads the beast out of the city. It was then released into the forest. Apparently, getting smacked on top of the head was embarrassing because the dragon never showed up in Paris again. Dragons sometimes were analogous to paganism. Satan has been described as being a serpent or sometimes as a dragon. A 3rd century military saint from the eastern Mediterranean, Saint George, slew his dragon in the Roman province of Libya in North Africa. In case you didn't know it, Romania got its name from Rome. St. George was born in Cappadocia in modern day Turkey in the 3rd century AD. Tradition holds that he was a soldier. He refused to practice pagan worship, and he may have burned down a Roman temple or two. That was why he became martyred. In order to be martyred, you have to have a really nasty, horrible, painful death. For later Christians, this monster represented pagans of the era that were threatening the virtues of Christian maidens only to be defeated by some knight. Dragon slaying became the most commonly portrayed element of his story during the Middle Ages. George's battle was also used to talk about contemporary Western knighthood and conflicts between Christians and Muslims. The saint was heavily invoked by Christians who stormed Jerusalem in 1099. Many depictions of St. George show him on horseback, dressed in full armor. They didn't dress like that until 1300s. St. George should be portrayed as being dressed more like a Roman soldier. After all, he was one. The Byzantine historian Michael Psellos wrote in the 11th century of a dragon that tormented Saint Marina. Marina had been thrown into jail and was being tortured by a Roman official who wanted to have his ways with her, wanted to make her his plaything. In the depths of the jail, back then, jails were mostly underground. They were easier to build and far easier to secure. You only needed 1 or 2 guards at the entrance. While in jail, Marina encountered a demon that was in the form of a dragon. The monster threatened her, ignoring her prayers, and finally it swallowed her whole. As Marina was going down the beast's throat, she prayed and began making the sign of the cross. The dragon began to thrash about, and its stomach burst open. Marina was able to crawl from its insides. Bet she didn't smell too good after that. The European dragons mostly come in two varieties. The first is the northern Germanic dragon that had wings, could fly through the air, and it breathed fire. This creature loved gold and other kinds of treasure. Whenever it found a hidden hoard, it would move in and sleep on top of the treasure. That sounds uncomfortable. Whenever it found a hidden hoard, well, that's where it was going to stay. This dragon was also called a fire drake because it breathed fire. It's best known from the literary sources such as the Old English epic poem Beowulf, which was composed in the 8th century and then it was rewritten in the 11th century. This dragon found a treasure hoard hidden in an ancient barrow and took up residence. When a slave snuck into the cave and stole a goblet, well, the enraged beast burned down Beowulf's great hall, and then he began attacking his people. The aging hero went to fight the monster alone. See, once again, why didn't he round up his army? He was armed with a special iron shield, but the monster seized his neck in its poisonous jaws. Beowulf's kinsman, Wiglaf, hurried to help him, and together they slew the creature. Beowulf died of his injuries, and he had a splendid funeral. The dragon was unceremoniously pushed off a cliff into the sea. J.R.R. Tolkien based the creature Smaug, the fiery dragon of the Hobbit story, on Beowulf that took control of the dwarf's horde. Tolkien added a detail from the most famous dragon of Old Norse legends, Fafnir. Fafnir also lies on vast piles of treasure that when Sigrid came on the scene became the Rhine gold. Tolkien's Smaug and the legendary Fafnir could both speak. Fafnir had warned Sigrid against coming treacheries, arcane mythological knowledge, and prophesied disaster for the hero if he failed to take heed of the dragon's warnings. So apparently the dragon could also predict the future. The dangerous fire drakes were rare. The most frequent types of dragons in England folklore were the land-based but poisonous kind. These creatures didn't usually have wings, and if it did, they were just too small to get the monster up off the ground. These beasties hung out in caves, marshes, and wetlands. They devoured cattle, sheep, and on occasion a maiden or two. The ones in the distress. I would be distressed too if a dragon was trying to eat me. A hero manages to dispatch the dragon, or a saint invokes the powers of God and forces it to move along. The boys in the white lab coats suggest that these dragon stories are all connected with locations where dinosaur bones or fossils were found. Some try to tell us dragons' lairs were situated near ancient battlefields. When the locals dug up piles of bones, these uneducated peasants decided that a dragon must have done the dirty deed. The real story is there doesn't seem to be any correlation between dinosaur finds and local dragon legends, nor between battle sites and monster sightings. People tend to remember when and where battles occurred, even if they forget who all was involved. Some super educated folks have suggested that dragon myths come from an innate fear of snakes, which is supposed to be a collective consciousness where people remember something that happened to somebody else hundreds of years ago, and they tell us there's nothing supernatural going on. People are supposed to have memories of things that happened to other people. Now who's telling tales? The theory is hundreds of years ago there were some big snakes that scared people, and their great, maybe a few more greats, grandkids, see dragons as a result. Another explanation is the whole dragon story was invented by people trying to keep their kids out of swamps, off mountains, and away from dangerous unseen creatures. There are some stories about dragons that do sound as far-fetched as you can get. The Orkney, Shetland, and Faroes Islands are the remains of Meister Storeworm, a huge sea dragon that would eat 7 girls every Saturday. This might have been to keep the girls home on the weekends. The storeworm, or Meister storeworm, was a gigantic evil sea serpent of Orcadian folklore, capable of contaminating plants and destroying animals and humans with its putrid breath. I've worked with a few people that could do that. You didn't want to stand too close when they were speaking. Anyway, back to the story. One day, a young man named Escipital was finding it difficult to find a date, seeing as this dragon was eating so many young girls. One day, he rode out to meet Meister Storeworm with a bucket of burning pitch. The dragon emerges from the depths, and he swallows both boy and boat. The burning peat sets the monster's liver on fire. The sea monster went into convulsions, spitting out Occipital before dying from internal injuries. The beast's teeth flew out across the North Atlantic, and they formed the Orkneys and the Shetlands and the Faroe Islands. His body solidified into Iceland, where his liver is still smoldering today, which is the cause of the island's volcanic activity. The legendary dragon of Mount Pilatus, Switzerland, from 1250 were said to cause terrible storms. A local hero, the Swiss knight Heinrich von, I was about to call him Winklebottom, no, Heinrich von Winkelried, killed one of the more belligerent dragons. He died after touching its poisonous blood. In European stories, a dragon-like creature known as a basilisk was sometimes described as an enormous snake or lizard that had a crown-shaped crest. Some authors called it the king of the serpents and claimed that it could kill a man with a single glance. Yes, I've worked with a few people that thought they had that ability. Some of the descriptions sound more like a dragon than a snake. Some legends said that dragons were actually demons sent to tempt men into sinning in order to obtain those huge gold and silver treasures. Others say that dragons were flesh and blood creatures that died out due to heroes out saving all those maidens or the saints that had driven them into uninhabitable regions. Once again, we find the folks who want to control the narrative telling us the folks living in Europe hundreds of years ago had very vivid imaginations and they simply dreamed up all the dragons that they had encountered. On the other side of the planet, things were quite different. Their dragons looked more like snakes. Some images had wings that were so small there was no way these things could get off the ground, and yet somehow they were able to fly. Way back, maybe 100 years ago, I installed carpet for a living. That's probably why my knees are shot today. One day, a guy that worked with me named Danny and I were heading into Houston to install carpet in a super rich woman's apartment. Her family owned an import company that was based out of Hong Kong. She owned a house in Houston, and one in Clear Lake City, and one in Hawaii, and one in Hong Kong, and a couple other houses. Like I said, she was super rich. Her apartment was on the eighth floor of an apartment that cost more money per month than everything I owned, including my truck. The woman asked us to take her a kind of older than dirt, rug to her new place. It was an ancient, hand woven wool carpet with images of dragons on it. It probably cost more than everything I owned as well. Danny looked at the carpet as we were rolling it up, and he said that this was from China because the dragons were all depicted with having four toes. If the rug had been from Japan, they would have only had three toes. This was back in 1976. There was no internet. There was no way of asking quick questions and getting answers. He just knew a lot about China, probably because he was super into martial arts. He carried a set of nunchucks in his back pocket. This was back when you could drink beer and drive. If a cop stopped you, you could ask them to hold your beer while you looked for your driver's license. Halfway into Houston, it started to rain. The rug was just rolled up and thrown in the back of the carpet, the back of the truck, and it was an open pickup. It was a rainin'. We pulled over under an overpass and pulled the rug out, shoved it into the cab, and then we got going again. It was laid across our laps. It was making driving a bit hard. I had to reach up over the carpet to grab the steering wheel. Brr. Well, somehow we managed to get into the apartment, and it stopped raining by the time we got there. The old lady, well, she was okay. She treated us nicely, and she would ask us to do things, not tell us. Her personal assistant, well, there was something wrong with that woman. As she tried to keep an eye on us the whole time we were in that apartment working. Well, there was two of us, and we weren't always working in the same room at the same time, so she would walk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying to keep an eye on us to make sure that we didn't steal something, which is kind of hilarious because the apartment was empty. There was nothing in it but us and a roll of carpet. Oh, yeah, and that fancy rug, but we'd brought that with us. Oh, well, I think it was hilarious at the time. I guess that's why she was the good minion that she was. It took us 3 days to finish that job, and the entire time I felt eyes on the back of my head. China has the longest continuous tradition of dragon stories, dating back more than 5,000 years. In Chinese imagery, dragons symbolize imperial rule and good fortune. The dragons of Chinese legend dwelt in distant waters, and although they were usually wingless, they could fly. Crucially, they brought the rain and hence the fruits of the soil. In the 12-year Chinese zodiac, dragon years are the most auspicious. And guess which year we're in today? Ying Zhang was born February 18th, 259 BC. He became known as Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin, aka the Yellow Emperor. In the movie Big Trouble in Little China, starring Kurt Russell, an ancient wizard, David Lo Pan, who was played by James Hong, was cursed by Qin after defeating him in a battle. Qin Shi Huang coined the title Wang Di, which translates as emperor, to refer to himself. Di did not refer to an earthly ruler, but to the highest god of the Shang dynasty. Wang Di received his magic powers when he was 100 years old. Instead of dying, a dragon came down from above, and Wang Di boarded it and flew off to the heavens, where he became one of the gods. In a recording from Liang County, the Fortunate Yet Strange Phenomena section, I like that title. I wish we had that in the news today. Today on the fortunate yet strange phenomena. Yeah, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Getting back to the story. Uh, Recorded a dragon sighting in the imperial palace. Lu Hong, the emperor of the Dong Han dynasty, had his capital city near today's Liang City in the Henan province. July 1st, 178 AD, a huge black object fell from the sky, landing in the east courtyard of the Wenming Palace. The object was over 65 feet long. It spun rapidly, giving out lights of different colors. The object had the head and the tail, but not the feet. It looked like a dragon. April 345, two dragons, one black and one white, appeared on Mount Long. The emperor of Yang Kingdom led officials of the court to the mountain, and they held a worship ceremony about 200 yards from the dragons. A few years later, a yellow dragon appeared in the Chishu River of Wyong City, and it remained there for 9 days before it finally left. A temple was built and a stone tablet was erected inside the temple to honor the appearance of the dragon. In the history of Yuan Dynasty, it states there appeared a dragon near Mount Long in Lingzhou County, Shandong Province, August 1190. The dragon was able to make a piece of rock weighing half a ton rise up into the air, as if by magic. In a written record from the Zhejiang region government, there's a story from Yi County. September 1588, a white dragon was spotted over Lake Ping of the Pinggu County, Zhejiang province. It was flying above the lake, illuminating half of the sky with a red light. Eyewitness Shen Maksoi, an historian records office for the royal court, saw a 100-foot tall deity dressed in purple clothes with a golden crown standing between the horns of the dragon. This deity held a sword in one hand. This could have been a UFO sighting, but the witness interpreted the craft as a dragon instead. 20 years later, the same area, July 1608, a second white dragon was seen flying over the same lake, and once again there was a deity seen standing on the head of the beast. Now, these sightings were not relied on memory. The court officials had written down all of these sightings for the official record. And it's not like they waited 100 years to write it down. They usually wrote it down right after it happened. July 1934, in a farmland in Tines Huang Ti, a small town in Yingkoi, uh, the folks working the fields heard a horrendous cry from the air. Something huge was falling from above. It screamed as it came. The thing hit the ground, and the peasants ran to see what it was. They found a creature with wings, two horns, razor-sharp claws, and scales all along its 32-foot body. Knowing what a dragon looked like because there were pictures of them everywhere, the farmers were amazed that they were now in the presence of one of these beasts. Europeans would have been scared and probably killed this magnificent creature. Not these folks. They ran to the river and brought back buckets of water for the dragon. The peasants drug timbers and boards, building a shelter to give the beast some shade. As big as this dragon was, this was no simple task. It took the entire village to accommodate this creature. Monks from the local monastery were told about this dragon. They went to the site to see it, worship it, and help in the dragon's recovery. After a short time, I don't know if it was a week or several, the dragon recovered and flew away. I could find no report of the villagers having any kind of good fortune or a blessing after they had helped the flying creature. There's no record on what had caused this beast to fall to the ground either. July 28th, the same year, a newspaper in the Xingji Times reported a similar incident in Yingkoi where the dragon fell from the sky. The dragon came down in a village, causing a lot of destruction and killing a few folks. Apparently, the dragon landed on a bunch of houses, killing the people inside. It also sank a few boats and it caused a train to derail. Uh, 9 people were reported as having been killed by the dragon fall. There was no report on what became of the beast's remains after the incident. There were some photographs taken. They show a great long skeleton with a pointy head that has 2 long horns sticking up from its skull. Guessing by the crowd standing in the background, the beast looks to be about 30 or 40 feet long. Okay, maybe these were just superstitious, uneducated farmers. What did they see that looked like a flying reptile? Why would they make humongous claims if there was nothing to them? This wasn't all that long ago. 90 years isn't that far in the past. The people involved had nothing to gain from telling a tale. There was no tourism in the area, nothing to draw people to the village. Nobody was doing a podcast or writing a book to bring cash into their community. And what about those photographs? Why would they fake these black and white images just to mess with people, maybe? 90 years ago, this entire village got together and they said, hey, let's make some fake dragon photos so that people in the future will be confused. In another village in Fuyu County, China, August 1944, hundreds of people found a huge black creature just south in the river. Yen Dingyoi, an eyewitness, said that the animal was about 22 feet long and it looked like a giant lizard. Its face was almost the same as that of a dragon's from many of the classic paintings. The creature had 7 or 8 thick, hard whiskers. The upper body was over a foot in diameter. Its 4 paws, it had legs, were sunk deep into the sand. The thing was covered with crocodile-like scales. The authorities came to the scene, loaded the monster into a truck, and took it away. In the summer 1953, an unidentified sea creature fell from the sky near a village south of Henan province. According to the description by many of the witnesses, the creature looked like a huge shark. It lay there for some time and the body began to rot. The odor attracted the flies. There was no follow-up as to what became of the flying shark. You might say, what does that have to do with dragons? How big would a bird have to have been to lift the huge shark. Maybe there was a dragon involved. Maybe this was his meal and he accidentally dropped it. Or maybe it was a gift for the villagers below. They neglected to eat their free food and let it rot instead. The next story sounds a lot like what happened back in 1934. August 4th, 2000. There was a downpour over the Hishan's village in China, and afterwards the village was covered by a layer of steam. Out of nowhere, a wall of thick clouds came down from the sky, rolling along just above the ground. The people in the village were scared by this bizarre sight. They'd never seen anything like it before. Everybody stayed inside with the doors and windows locked, occasionally peeking out to see what was going on. A young man, you know the kind, doesn't listen to his elders, decided that it was safe enough and he went outside to see what was going on. He walked around the village, but he saw nothing of interest. Made his way out of the village, where he came across a bizarre sight. There were two dragons laying on the ground. One was black and the other one was white. These creatures looked just like the paintings from years past. They had horns, scales, tails, just like the images from the past had shown. The young man ran back to the village, telling everybody to come see what he had found. Most thought he was just pranking them, but one or two did follow him. Once they had seen these two creatures as well, the word was spread, and soon the entire village was out there looking at these two dragons. The news spread from the village throughout the entire region. Police, government officials, and scholars from the university all showed up to see if there were really dragons there. The police officials dispersed the crowd and they left officers to guard these two animals. A strong gust of wind came out of nowhere, pushing dark clouds over the two beasts. The guards did their best to stay in their posts, but when the clouds dispersed, the white dragon had vanished. The officials were unable to explain the disappearance, and they were frustrated about the black dragon that was still laying on the ground. A farmer said that he had heard something like this happening many years ago, which was probably the 1934 incident. He told how the locals had built a shelter for their dragon. Well, it wasn't their dragon, but they had built a shelter for the dragon to help it out. They supplied it with water, and eventually the dragon flew away. So the villagers in 2000 reenacted the earlier incident, building a shelter and supplying the black dragon with water. According to the reports that I read, as of December 2000, the beast was still there and still alive. This was in 2000, and nobody had a cell phone? No videos were taken? No selfies standing in front of this mythical creature? This story is either just hooey, or maybe the authorities wouldn't let them take any photographs. No pictures allowed. After all, China is not like the United States, where anything that happens, everybody whips out their cell phone and takes pictures. It's a little different over there. As the sky was getting dark in the evening September 2000, at about 6:10 p.m. in Wusong City, a beam of unusual light shot down from the northwest sky above the city. It soon became brighter and multicolored. A dragon-like creature appeared. Its mouth, whiskers, paws, and scales could all be seen clearly. The dragon was visible for more than 20 minutes. The bright light eventually dimmed to a dark red before it slowly disappeared. The dragon was visible the entire time the light was there. The Kojiki, written in 712 AD, and the Nihon Shoki both say that Susanoo was the son of the god Izanagi. Susanoo managed to get himself banished from heaven. I wonder what he did. He came down from heaven, landing in the central land of Reed Plains, better known as Earthly Land of Japan. After he was here on Earth, Susanoo met an elderly couple, a Shanzuki and Tenzuki, who told Shushano 7 of their 8 daughters had been devoured by a monster sea serpent known as Oruchi. This creature had 8 heads and 8 tails. Having 8 heads and only eaten 7 daughters, it was about time for number 8 to be invited to dinner. The old couple didn't want the last girl, Kushinadami, to be on the menu. She wasn't much thrilled by it either. I find it thought provoking how the 7 girls were being eaten by the monster. It sounds like the story of the Meister storeroom from Scandinavia. Why 7 girls? Why 7 daughters? Shushanu had the old couple brew up some extra strong sake and place it in 8 jars. He had Kushinadami transformed into a comb, which he hid in his hair. He got all 8 heads of the dragon to drink the sake, and once the dragon was soused, he killed it. Doesn't seem fair. You're not supposed to kick a dragon when it's down, unless it has 8 heads. Doesn't that sound a little bit like the legend from the Norse? Inside one of the monster's tails, Sushanu found a sword which has become the sacred sword of the imperial regalia of Japan. Closer to home, in 2010, a man said that he found a bird with what looks like the head of a dragon. The wings were covered with skin like a bat. The rest of the body had scales. The naysayers rushed out and said that it was just CGI, or misidentification. The thing was found in the desert, and the locals began calling it the Monterey Dragon. And there are videos of it out there, but they're not very good. A man from Pennsylvania caught what looked like a dragon flying through the air. The creature had enormous wings that it would flap as it went rolling along. Maybe it was a drone, but I haven't seen too many drones out there with flapping wings. I have seen several videos with almost the same creature, which makes me wonder, is the image CGI, or is there actually a dragon flying over Pennsylvania? I did some searching and I found a few models that you can buy that look close to what's in the videos. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Is it some kind of a weird dragon model that people are using, CGI, or is there something up there that we need to keep our eyes out for? The Bedford Times Independent in Bedford, Iowa, August 11th, 1887, reported that a man named Lee Corder encountered a flying serpent. He said it was writhing and twisting, with protruding eyes and a forked tongue. Great scales which glistened in the sunlight covered its huge body, which appeared to be flat and nearly a foot in width. The beast seemed to fly and land with a thud in Mr. Corder's cornfield. He watched with awe and astonishment as eventually this dragon returned to the sky. October 1890, Independence, Iowa, was home to several reports of a monster with wings, a monstrous head with horns, a mouth like an alligator. The creature also appeared to be green in color and covered with scales. Several Burlington, Iowa residents reported seeing dragons flying over the city in just the last few years. Two witnesses described one as being brown skinned with a long snake like body, 15-foot bat like wings. Its head was shaped like a seahorse, and it had a skinny tail that flowed out behind. They watched the dragon flapping its wings and soaring into the sky until it vanished from sight. One witness said in 2005 that she and her husband witnessed a flying dragon while driving on the streets of Burlington in the middle of the night. It was described as 10 feet long, snake like, with bat wings and the head similar to a seahorse as well. A witness from Grand Mound, Iowa, said that they see these creatures all the time. The sightings are usually in the fall when the moon is full or mostly full. The dragons have been accused of stealing cows from neighboring farms and sometimes a few smaller animals. Back in 1980s, a boy of about 10 saw a dragon flying over Hamilton, New Jersey. He was riding his bike just before noon. He saw what at first he thought might be an old biplane heading in the direction of the local airfield. They had several that would land there during the summer. The boy stopped to watch the plane fly by, and when he realized that the wings were moving, he stared at what turned out to be a dragon flying right over his head. The scales looked to be dark red, and there was no sound as the beast passed from sight. 2013, a man was driving near Marlton, New Jersey, when he spotted something up in the sky. The sun was still high in the sky, and there were no clouds to get in the way. Getting a closer look, he could see what looked like a dragon. It had a pointy head, a long neck, slightly rounded body, with huge bat-like wings. The creature was slowly flapping its wings as it sailed through the air. The naysayers tell us there are no dragons, and there never were. They thump their chests and they drag out that old dusty fossil record. See, no dragon fossils have ever been found, so dragons could never have existed. Fossils are hard to make, and there are thousands of creatures that have never been found as a fossil. To become a fossil, things have to take place just right. An animal has to die. Its skeletal, its body settles to the sea floor where it becomes buried by sediment. The sediment surrounding the body thickens and it begins to turn to stone. As years go by, the body dissolves and the hollow mold is formed. Minerals crystallize inside the mold and begin to take on the size and the shape of the now missing animal. Once the fossil is formed and it is exposed to the Earth's surface, if and when the sea levels go down. If any of these steps are missed, there will be no fossil for the boys in the white lab coats to hide in the basement of the Smithsonian. Why would the folks in charge not want to acknowledge something that is seen and written about for thousands of years? Well, I do have my theory. When people finally became smart, unlike those people who were seeing dragons, they began declaring that anything they didn't believe in was just fantasy. Some guy would get himself appointed as president of a huge university, and he would move into the big office, the one that all of his underlings longed to have. He was now the man. Anytime anybody came along with evidence of a dragon, the president would say, "That's not a real thing, because I don't believe it's real." The underling would hold out his findings and he would say, "Well, look, here's the evidence." And the president would say, "You must be mistaken." Or, Would you like to go looking for a new job? The evidence would either be thrown away or locked in the basement somewhere. And like I said, that's just my theory on how things are done. Anytime something shows up and somebody doesn't believe it can possibly be real, they have a choice. They can change the way they believe, or they can simply make the evidence go away. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, spread the word. Tell people they should be listening to Strange Things with Chris James. If you'd like to support the show, you can buy one of my books at Amazon.com. If not, well, don't buy one. If you have a story, something to do with a UFO right now, I'm looking for UFO stories. If you've got one, it's true as far as you know, something you heard from your family member or a friend, send it to me at strangethings@arcanasa.com and I'll put you in my next book. It has to be a true story, or as far as you know it's true. And like I said earlier, if you don't want your name mentioned, just tell me and I'll give you a fake name. Do it all the time. So do most writers. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.